followers that have been following us since 2007. So we definitely appreciate it. So what we're going to do first is we're going to talk about New Hampshire, and we're going to look at some auctions that have taken place over the last 6-7 months or so in New Hampshire. Now, New Hampshire is classified as a tax deed state, but they're a little bit different than other states because they're going to sell through the cities and municipalities and the townships. So unlike most tax sales, you're going to be looking at a county level. Here, there's every single city is going to have their own tax sale essentially. So after 2 years of being delinquent, then the city tax collector will go ahead and initiate the foreclosure process. Now, they have to advertise this at least 25 days before the auction. So usually at about a month before the auction, that's when you're going to start seeing the tax sale list come up.
Yeah, the sales themselves are sold by oral bid. Now, is this an online auction we're going to be looking at tonight?
No, in fact, most of New Hampshire's are all on-site auctions. I can only find a couple examples of online auctions, so most of this is going to be held right there in the city town hall.
You know, but what that means though, for anybody that's listening, is there are places around the country that still hold live auctions. And the advantage of living in those areas is that, you know, you can kind of be there to participate in sales, and you're only, you know, the only competition are the people around you and the amount of money that comes in that room that day. And so there can be wonderful opportunities there to get properties at very good prices. You know, if you happen to live in that area, it's an advantage you should take advantage of, or at least something that you should consider. So other than that though, they use premium bidding, you know, just like most other states where, you know, you're bidding the property up, high bidder wins. You know, some of them do have over-the-counter deeds. You know, so they have other, I believe there are some auction sites here, some on-site auctions, some other auctions that they'll do, but we're going to go and check a look at some of these properties here that sold, actually remarkable properties. I was looking at these earlier, Steve was showing me, and I was kind of blown away by just how good the deals are in a place like New Hampshire, which I hadn't really thought about.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, you know, one thing to talk about as well is that some of the New Hampshire sales will allow you to do sealed bids. So there can still be opportunity for out-of-state investors to invest if that particular city is doing some type of sealed bid. So that's something to kind of keep in mind as well. Now, it's a lot harder to find. You can find lots of tax sale lists, but finding the results are a little bit tougher. So in this case, we're going to look at a couple of different counties. The first property that we're going to look at is kind of a beaten up house, but we're going to get into it a little bit more. So this home right here and this lot right here, essentially this whole area was purchased for about $75,000. So in looking at them, let's get a little bit more into the details.
Yeah, let's pull up the list if we can.
I don't know where I think I got these off of a different list. So this property and this property ended up selling for $75,000. So this one right here, we can kind of see older photos of it, but what they ended up doing is they've got this property listed right now, or just sold. So this sold, you know, just recently for $99,000. So this was this second lot that was right here, and they went ahead and torn down this house, and then they've sold this lot right here for $100,000. And I would imagine that they're probably doing the rehab on this particular home. So together, you know, this property was worth about $236 plus another $100,000. So, you know, about $336,000. They paid $75,000 for it, and you know, they've already made $100,000 out of it.
Yeah, that seems pretty good.
There's a couple of these ones, and then we'll go look at the other ones. Now this house here, and this was, again, look how small of area this is. So there, if we're looking in the bigger cities, there's going to be, you know, probably some more nicer properties, but, you know, looking for those sold results, this is a big old home. And usually we would probably avoid this type of property, but, you know, it does have a value of $332,000. So when I was looking through here, there wasn't a lot of cheap homes that were selling for that cheap. So if we bought this, if me and Shade bought this, I would imagine that we would probably just clear it out, secure it up, and then sell it to somebody at a discount where we can make a good profit.
If you click on the Rochester, the top of the Taxable Titans of Rochester, New Hampshire, it'll pull the list. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. So that's the list that we're working off of, right?
Yeah.
All right, so that's the $75,000 sale there. You can see that they're not huge sales, but they're also, you've got very limited numbers of buyers here, and the amounts are still pretty low.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and these are probably local investors. So the next one we're going to look is this property right here that ended up selling for 120, and it's this one right here. And so, they paid quite a bit for it, but I would imagine that, somebody was willing to buy it. Now, here's a little bit newer of a property. This is this one. I don't know why it's doing that. Right here, that was sold for 140,000. And it's this apartment essentially right here, excuse me. So in looking at it, Redfin, they're valuing it at about 186,000. It's a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath.
286.
287,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. Built in 1980. So it's a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath, and here's a property that's in the exact same area that just sold for 300.
Yeah, so the value on the property looks like it's around 274 to 300 is kind of what we're seeing there with the comps. And meaning that they picked it up for about half of value maybe. And the one before that, I think valued it closer to like 360. They probably picked that one up for about a third of value.
Yeah. Well, and these first two properties are probably going to need some work, right? I mean, obviously. But this next one, we're looking at, essentially a condo unit in here. So we don't have to worry about the roof. We don't have to worry about the foundation. I know that we always say this type of thing, but in this case, we're just going to be really, rehabbing the interior on it, which is probably not going to cost us that much as in comparable to trying to rehab one of the other properties we were looking at.
Yeah, well, it was built in 1980. It's like 1,068 square feet, so it's not that big. It's 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, so there's a limited amount of stuff that you need to fix up inside the property, and all that stuff makes it safer for an out-of-state investor in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so I mean, they're still getting it for under 50 cents on the dollar, or about 50 cents on the dollar, and it has a high enough value that, let's say that they put in even 20 grand, which is only 1,000 square feet, 2-bedroom with bath. So you could do, a pretty good little rehab on it, and at that point, be able to make over 100 grand on it.
Yeah, I mean, that first property for 75,000, they really have, they got both properties for 75,000, and there's a potential there for the property to be worth a lot, to be worth 300 plus, 350,000 plus. So there's a lot of profitability in some of these deals, especially for just being a local live auction that people in New Hampshire can attend.
Yeah. Now, here's a property, essentially it ended up selling in this Barrington City area. And, we can see that it sold for 7,500. I mean, 7,500. The county's valued it at about 31,000. You can see some of the details down here, but essentially it had kind of this little shed and an outhouse on it. But as we look a little bit into it, they've actually provided us with a video of the property. So it's got a creek running through it. And then as it comes around, you'll kind of see where that structure is at. So this was picked up for $7,500. The county's valued at about 35.
Yeah.
And here's kind of where the property would be located at. Here's kind of that little river you can see that comes through that side. Here's Redfin kind of just doing the assessed value. And here's a lot that's pretty close to it that's currently for sale for 89,000.
Yeah, so they
So
paid 31 and it's worth about 89.
no, they paid 7,500. That's how
Oh,
much they paid, and that's what the county is assessed it at.
oh, nice. Well, they really got a good deal on it then.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's only worth, let's say, 37,000 instead of the 90,000, still you picked it up for 7,500. Let's say it's worth 40, you turn around and sell it for even 25 or 30, you've still made a pretty good return on your money. And and kind of looking at some of the comps within this area, I think it's probably closer to 50.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Now this next one here, we can see that essentially it's on this Longshore Drive, and they provided a video as well for it, which this is nice. I mean, this isn't something that you see all the time. It's part of the reason kind of chose this particular county to look at. And it's this lot right here. So you can, as you scroll out, you can kind of see that there's kind of this road that goes on both sides of this long pond, with homes on either side of it
And it sold for 4,000.
for 4,000. And the county's assessed it at 15. But here's the exact lot on Redfin, valued at 41,000. You can see they're both that 0.33 acre. And then, here's one that sold two lots down. Now it was a couple of years ago, but it sold for 40. So picking it up for $4,000, valued at 40, that's a pretty good deal as well.
Yes, I mean, selling price is at 40 2 years ago, basically. I mean, a year and a half, 2 years ago, it looked like it was in December of 2024. So yeah, those are the numbers are about as good as you can get there for smaller purchases. I mean, purchase of $4,000 there for a $40,000 lot is pretty good.
Yeah, it's not bad. You're getting a tax deed on it. There's, no redemption period to it. In fact, here's another one that sold for 40,000 in November of 2024.
Yeah,
As well.
it's a couple of good comps in the area to kind of set the value. So the value's pretty solidly at that $40,000 mark for a property that you picked up for $4,000 and it's assessed at about 15.
Yeah. Yeah. So overall, I think, a pretty good deal, worth bidding on. Now this is one ended up bidding up. It ended up bidding to 35,000. The county's valued it at 78,000. We'll go ahead and check out that video as well. You can see kind of the lake down there below it. Nice lot. You've already got hookups and everything there to put up a trailer. And it's also got a well and septic.
Yeah, you got to click on the Redfin for this one. It's pretty impressive. At least I think this is the Redfin.
Well, here's a couple of properties that have sold. So, Redfin's valued it at 73,000. But as we look into the comps, that's really where we can get an idea. This one is valued at
That's right. It's the
200.
second comp. It's the second comp that I was looking at that sets that value.
Well, yeah, this one does. This one has a structure on it, but it's just kind of an old trailer, so also a pretty nice lot. So this is a little bit different, but I was trying to find comps that were as close as I could to this. And this is a little bit, kind of a small community.
Yeah. Well, in any case, it's valued at least 150 to 200,000 probably, and
Yeah,
maybe above that.
yeah, yeah. I think it could easily be worth, it's definitely higher than 73. Like Shade said, I think it could be as high as 150. And what's nice about it is you've got, the well and septic already there. That's huge. You've got your own water and a septic right there on the property, which means it's closer to an improved property. This is the perfect camping type property for somebody if they wanted to, or they could, build on it as well.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing all these properties have in common is these are all picked up for fairly low amounts. I mean, this one they paid 35 for a little bit, but again, there's also the potential for probably $100,000 worth of profit from that deal. The next one they only paid 3,000 for, and it's got quite a bit of value here as well. but they're smaller investments, the kind of investments that you can do, for less than $5,000, and have properties that have substantial value.
Yeah, here's one that sold for 3,000.
Yeah, and it's about a 0.44 acre lot. The county assesses it at about 16,000, but it's on that same pond, that we're just looking at there with the other that $327,000 mobile home lot there. It's one of the lots here that mobile home was on this same pond. And so all of these are very similar in that they're pulling comps, from other nearby properties here. So the values are pretty solid based on everything around here that's currently selling.
Yeah, you're right between these two other homes. Here it is on Redfin, valued at $80,000. Here's one that sold in. Now this one's on the other side, but this is just kind of a directly above it. So it's going to have a higher value, but it's still sold for 200,000. So even if we say that it's only worth 80,000, which I think it could be worth as high as 120, it's sold for $3,000.
Yeah, and those are numbers that are as good as you can find anywhere. That's picking up properties for, under 5% of value. It's basically picking up for close to 1 or 2% of value. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Now this next one, is 6.6 acres, and it's right here off of this road. So it's kind of starts right here and then goes all the way over here. And if we're looking at the map here, we can kind of see it also includes this little piece down here below as well.
Is that to access the water? Is that an access point?
No, this is just kind of a little road that you can see kind of goes back along here. You can kind of see it right here as well. So it kind of splits off, but it's really got all of this frontage from right here all the way to here. So if we look down this is kind of all it, all along here. It was picked up for 55,000. Here's a comp that's actually half the size of it. This is actually right off of this road. So if we were coming back and looking at this, I don't know why it took me there, but this is just off of the main road that we were just looking at. So, this is right kind of off of here. So this is right there on the main road.
Yeah, it's half the size, and it sold for 185,000 in 2024.
Yeah. This one again is half the size, sold for 160, and this one's way out. Not way out, but it's not right there close to the road, off of the main road with the other road as well.
That's interesting. So the one that they bought, it very well could be worth about this amount here, 360,000. That what they got for 55.
Yeah, and sold. I had to go back a few years to find some good comps, and that's something to think about as well. You want to check into the real estate market, but when you're picking up, a property like this, 55, for $55,000, and it's 6.2 acres. Plus, it's along this road, so it could be used. It could potentially be used as commercial. If it's not, it's probably residential now, but you could easily do as commercial. So probably, overall, I think was a good deal for him.
Yeah, I think that turned into a really good deal.
Now we're going to look at a few more before we flip it back. Now this was interesting to me. I think that these were probably, those deals were good, but these were pretty incredible. So they had all of these lots that were in this development that essentially almost got built. It didn't get finished getting built, or some of it got built. Like some of these roads go out to them. And what they did is they just grouped them together and sold them in 4 different batches. So A1 through A4. So this first batch is this A1 that we can see over here to the left-hand side. And we can kind of get an idea of what it sold for right here. So it sold for $20,000, and it's 12 acres, and the county's assessed it at 127,000.
That's crazy because it's probably worth quite a bit more than the 127.
Yeah, you know, they did kind of provide a video. It's a little bit longer. We won't go through all of 23 seconds, but they just kind of drive past it. But you can get kind of a better idea by looking, you know, from Google Maps. So this property, we can see here where the street goes, and then it kind of comes here to St. Matthews. So where you would do a road, if you were to build this, would kind of be right out through here past this big home right here. But this is a whole development where there's, you know, a bunch of really, really nice homes. So you can kind of see where, you know, where there's the first 3 lots, and then that's where you'd kind of build a road, and that's where that big mansion is sitting. It's on lot 29 right here. So we'll look here at the comps here in a minute, but just based on that one, sold for 20 grand, valued at 127. This next one is this section right here that ended up selling for 30 grand, and it's almost 20 acres, valued at 285.
Oh, that's crazy. The fact they're getting it for 10% of assessed is nuts.
Yeah. Well, you can kind of see this is right up here. So this is all of this kind of area up here, right here. So you've actually got a road out there to where this lot starts, and this road kind of goes all over to the side of here. So, you know, it kind of starts here and then ends, you know, kind of out here. So it kind of takes this right portion of it. And then the third one is this lot right here. So these 2 lots that are right here.
Yeah, it's basically 4 acres picked up for 20,000.
Yeah, and it's right in this area. So 4 acres for 20,000. And what was interesting is here is the actual property, and they just sold it in January.
For 261.
Yeah.
Holy cow! So they got that for $20,000.
$20,000, and they
261.
just sold it for 261.
Holy cow! That's about as good as you'll ever see. You know, for a tax sale deal there. You know, they got it for 10% of value there and have it sold for more than that shortly after.
Yeah, and you can even see, you know, if we're looking at it right here, we can kind of see exactly where that is, where it kind of juts out right there and then comes down. And we can kind of see the same thing happening right here. So this is exactly the lot. They picked it up for 20 grand, and they sold it for 261,000.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. And kind of get a look of it there. You know, here's a couple of other type of comps. This is only 2.3 acres, sold for 153. 3.6 acres, and look how kind of weird it is.
Yeah.
Sold 143, and this was 5 acres, and this one's a little bit off the beaten path. This sold for 150. And then there's this last one as well, and it's this section right down here, A4.
Yeah, it's like 14.6 acres that was picked up for 40,000, assessed at 496.
Yeah, and what's kind of interesting about this one is that it includes this section that's all been cleared out. Me and Shade were talking about this earlier today because it looks like they were probably bringing in dirt or something, because that looks like it was taken from somewhere else. But it kind of starts right along here, along the pavement, goes down this way. You can kind of go back and see it here. That's kind of where that starts at.
Holy cow! For 40 grand, they're going to be able to make $500,000 on that.
Yeah, so that, you know, it kind of starts right here, goes down there quite a ways, and then goes all back there.
Holy cow, that's nuts. It's not every day that you'll see an investment for under 50,000 with that kind of profit potential on it.
Yeah, I mean, even if we're just taking what the county says, you know, they're valuing it at $500,000.
Yeah.
You know, so like, I mean, when we talk about, and there was a structure on it as well, which, you know, looks like it was kind of old, but still, you know, this is buying in property for less than 10 cents on the dollar and having the opportunity to easily make 300 grand.
Yeah, I'm sure you could. I mean, they're already subdivided essentially. you know, so
Yeah,
I wonder, you could probably sell them separately.
yeah. Well, I think that that's kind of what, what some of the plan probably would be. But this person that just bought the 2 lots, they did this. They did what was, that was smart what they did, because, really the road was already kind of out there anyway. They have this Susan Lane, and it goes right here to the edge of their property. Now it's not, the greatest road, but you've still got a dirt road going out to the property, and then just turn around and ended up selling it for 261,000.
Yeah, every single one of those deals are crazy deals. So for if anybody in New Hampshire that can attend some of these auctions, these are some examples of some of the best types of land that you can find anywhere in the country, really.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, kind of interesting. And again, when we found lots of past sale, we could have showed you even some, well, probably not as great a land deal. I mean, that land deal was awesome, or a couple of those land deals. But there's some really nice properties that come up to the market. It's just finding out what they sold for, not what their minimum amount was. So, these are properties that have sold. We know what they sold for, and so I'm sure we can find this the same in many of the other cities and towns within that area.